Hey guys, thanks for coming and checking out our first specialized video of the end of the season. I told you I wasn't going to put new videos up, but I freaking lied. This is the main. I got to put some stuff on the main. So I figured out something that I could put out here for everybody. And I'm going to compare and contrast a few things that we do over here. And I don't know if you've ever watched one of my videos, but sometimes it's a little wet and sometimes it's a little dry when we're doing our work. The customers always wonder, well, can you even do it when it's wet? And the answer is sometimes. Maybe. No, honestly, if it's wet and it's not going to be raining for a couple days, there's no problem. I mean, hell, even if it's going to be raining the next day, as long as we can get in there early enough and get it to start drying before that next rain comes and give it a nice thick skin on it, then you'd be fine. So let me go over what it means to do it dry, what it means to do it wet, the differences, and why it really doesn't matter. So first, let me go over the easiest conditions you can have on a driveway, which are the dry days. Sun's out, slight breeze, so I'm not dying out there. And typically right around 70. I like it around 7. I like it a little warm. Some people like to have their little jacket on or their little pullover on so that they can take that on and off. Keeps you from sweating. And honestly, it's good either way. But I kind of like that little bit of warm where I have to have my t-shirt on, maybe a little bead of sweat or two on my forehead, and dry conditions. Those are the best conditions for completing a seal coat job. It goes really quick, real simple. There's not really a lot of problems aside from normal shenanigans. And then you have your wet conditions, which honestly, if I could never do a job on a wet day, it'd make me happy. It's not that it can't be done with quality, because it can. We have all the equipment and everything necessary to make sure that whatever we do there is up to snuff. But there's extra. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down kind of step by step, what each step entails for the dry and wet and why that's so much of a difference. Okay, so the first thing we always do when we step up to a job, aside from me walking to the door and trying to arm wrestle a check out of a customer's hand, is the two guys will hop out and we'll put signs, tape, stakes, that kind of stuff. But the first thing we do is whip. You always weed whip. It's the first thing you do. Now, sometimes a job will be super dirty. Usually not a homeowner. Usually homeowners kind of keep their stuff a little bit taken care of, but sometimes you'll get to some parking lots and you'll have to actually blow it first because it's so full of rocks that if you start whipping, you're just going to be throwing shrapnel everywhere. But that's kind of an odd off one. We can talk about that later in one of the other items I have here, but typically it's whip. And let me just preface all this by saying that if you want to know in depth about any specific task that we do, like whipping, blowing, scrubbing, what it means, what it is, I cover it in other videos, so go ahead and check out some of the other videos and you can kind of get a feel for what we mean when we say whip. Everything that we have to actually use the weed whip for. So anyway, go ahead and check that stuff out in those other videos. And then you're going to get out your metal broom, unless it's a just complete slider and there's no dirt nowhere, even if it's wet. If it's wet, there's typically going to be somewhere on there where it's got some dirt. Water washes dirt down in through things. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you get a driveway that's elevated enough to where everything washes off of it onto the surrounding area and you don't really have that problem. But when you're doing dry or wet, you're going to bring out that broom typically. So we're going to say we're bringing out the broom. Now this is kind of where the differences start, because when you're doing dry, you can broom it with the metal broom, scuff anything up you want to scuff up, and then just dust it off with the blower and it's fine, it's gone, it's out of there, you can start rubbering. However, when you're doing wet conditions, you have to take a little extra care, because as you're brooming this stuff, you're exposing some more wet usually underneath when it's dirty. And if it's on a crack, you're going to have to go over it now again with the blower. And sometimes as you're blowing, what you're blowing from the back towards where you're scuffing stuff up with the brush, it will bring more dust. And I don't know if you've ever tried blowing dust over something wet or kind of dusting something that's wet. The dust sticks really good to it and you got to clean it off again. So you're going to be cleaning multiple times, unless you do what I'm about to suggest here, is when you have a wet condition on a driveway, if you're blowing, you get the backpack, just take a broom with you. just take a broom with you because you're the last line of defense. And as long as there's no more dust getting blown over whatever you may leave that's a little damp, there's not going to be any dirt on it. You know what I mean? You're not going to be blowing more dust over top of it to collect over onto the wet. Or you can have a guy come with you with a brush, and he'll work with you as you're blowing and make sure that everything's going downhill, you know, downwind. And then there's that added job when you have wet, which is torching the cracks, because rubber does not stick to water or dirt. So you're kind of screwed there if you leave yourself a little dirty, a little wet. Your rubber is going to be insufficient. So you have to make sure that you clean it very well. So that means you're brushing and blowing together so that you don't have any debris that's stuck to the wet, and anything wet is exposed for the torch to dry. Now, another problem you'll have is after you torch something, if it was a little dirty like inside, the torch will actually dry up some of that wet dirt and turn it back into like a dust or like a sand. It'll be like a dry, sticky sand over the crack where you'll have to come clean it again, blow it again, because it was wet. And then you dried it, and now it's dry, so you had to come. You know what I mean? It's kind of a process when it's wet to make sure that you get down. And really, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get some of that crack to be. You want to expose it a little bit, enough where the rubber can get down in there into a dry area and stick. Because if that rubber isn't on the wet, like if you leave it wet or dirty, like I said, it won't stick. So it's kind of a fine line. It's hard to meet sometimes on the wet days. But once you've done it a few times, a few hundred times, a few thousand times, you know how to blow through it pretty quick. You know, regardless of the fact that it's going to take a little longer than dry, but you can still get through it pretty quick. And even on your best days, no matter what you're doing, how you're doing it, where you're doing it, you're going to have to use next item on the list, which is the blower. This is an item where people don't really understand how important this part really is. People will leave their edges full of crap to where you brush it and your brush picks it up with the bristles and just drags a bunch of leaves and dirt and crap onto the driveway. People are used to just blowing grass and stuff off from, you know, cutting the grass. This is a little more intricate. You really got to take your time, slow down, and use this thing properly. You can see it in some of the videos how it's supposed to be done. Then you got your cracks, and sometimes you got to do sand. And sand is like dust; it can be sticky. So you just got to really make sure if you're sanding on these cracks that you're blowing them off, and you might even have to dust them just a smidge. You don't want to get too crazy with the broom when you're dusting off the sand because you want it to stay in the crack, but you don't want it to be sticking to the surface just outside of the crack where it may be still damp. So you got to slightly dust that off so that you may even have to come back again and dry with the torch after you've sanded and maybe dust it off a little with the blower. It can be a real process, let me just tell you. Doing it on a wet day typically takes you about a quarter to a third longer of a day. So let's say your day was a typical 8-hour day, you're now going to be spending 12 hours. 11 hours, maybe 10 hours, something like that, because now your day's wet. And if you're lucky and you start a wet day, as the day goes by, it's sunny, maybe it's starting to dry some things out and your day starts to slowly pick up in speed because it's drier and drier as you go. Those days aren't too bad because you got something to look forward to. But some days are just wet, cloudy, breezy, the trees are just dripping still, and it's just a horrible shit show out there. It can be. And now we get to lay some of that hot black gold we call rubber. When it comes to the rubber, there's a few different items we use. It all depends on what we're doing. If it's a commercial job, we'll use the wand, which has the melter on it, and it goes pretty quick, as you can see here. We also have the Cam 10s, which they hold a lot of material, so you can kind of go pretty quick with them, and it's a one-man operation with those guys. And also we have the bander, which is a one-man operation. It doesn't hold as much, and it's tougher to use, but if you're in a pinch in a small spot, it's not bad. It's good for residentials for a one-man crew. And then you have the pour pot and V-squeegee, which is our bread and butter. We can go quick with 2 guys. Everybody's pretty proficient at them now. So yeah, that's the rubber part. Now, there's some special conditions, okay? I've been describing to you the difference between wet and dry on your average driveway, there's some special situations out there. So there's some driveways that are super dirty. Those are the ones I was talking about where you actually have to use the blower first, so you don't whip rocks into everybody's face and blow out windows and things of that nature. Those are the super dirty ones, and if you're lucky, they're dirty, but they're still solid. Like once you get all the dirt and rocks off of them, they're not that bad underneath. Thick asphalt. It may be cracky, but it's holding together well. And then you have your super dirty but crumbling. The area you're watching on the video right now shows you that, kind of where Corey's walking right there. I mean, you put a blower to that, and you're basically going to get down to the dirt. This Detroit job we have right here has pretty much the worst conditions you can have. Back there where you can see a little bit of the Sealcoat line there, where it's kind of black in the back, just a little bit. That's kind of where they maintained it, for whatever reason they maintained it back there before. And some of the asphalt's still pretty good back there, but most of this place is trashed. And same situation, you gotta get your blower out first, but as you're blowing, you're realizing like, dude, there's nothing left of this driveway. So you have a couple choices. You can either kind of half-ass it and leave a little bit of rocks if you're brushing it, and just kind of like try to save some of it, or you just blow the shit to smithereens, get it all, shovel it up, pull it in the back of your truck like a couple wheelbarrows worth, and then paint what's left. I like the latter. I like to get rid of any aggregate that's sitting there, because if you're driving over these rocks and this nasty stuff, you're just crushing whatever's left of your driveway back down into nothing again, and you're creating more aggregate popping out. So the least amount of aggregate you can have on and around your driveway, even like at the end of your driveway, if I'm doing it, no, typically we don't leave shit in the road. Sometimes guys will do that and you got to yell at them, but I not only clean our debris out of the road, but I kind of give you a little clean pad as you're pulling into your driveway. So it gives you a spot, hopefully, to knock off whatever's on your tires before you roll in your driveway, you know, and dust. And plus, you're not dragging anything from the end of your driveway into your driveway, as much as I can help it and for as long as I can help it. And I just think that's just professional quality, professional courtesy for the customer. Then you have your brand new. Like, when you're doing your brand new, you whip your edges. I mean, you blow it off. You don't. Sometimes there's no cracks. And if there's no cracks and there's no rubber, then you can just, that's like a whole portion of the day that you're skipping. You don't have to do on that job, and that's great. Then usually when it's brand new, it slides nice and easy. You can brush it on. Those are the favorites, obviously, for obvious reasons. Then you have your rubber only jobs, which is you're coming up and you're pretty much cleaning it just like you're going to seal coat, but you don't necessarily have to blow it off perfectly. I mean, unless it's really bad. If it's really bad and there's nowhere for you to kind of dust things off too, besides another crack, because it's just so cracked up, then you just got to clean the whole thing off. But if it's just a crack job where it's like a bunch of linears and it's not like a lot of cracks, you can just dust off the cracks and leave the debris laying on the asphalt next to it, you know, the solid asphalt. You don't have to clean it off if you're just doing a rubber job. Now, it is a toss-up. Sometimes we do clean it completely, even if it doesn't need it, just because, you know, maybe the customer paid good money, or they paid extra for the cleaning, or it's not that big a lot and we can take care of it, or it's like a special request person, you know, a special friend of the owner or something, or maybe it's one of the people that we are doing it for, because we're allowed in our company to get one free seal coat a year for a family member, which is, I think, is pretty cool for the company to do. So unless it's those situations, then we're just going to kind of dust it off as much as we need to. And then you have your seal only, where there is no rubber. Even if it looks like, even it has cracks in it, it's just a seal coat only. Now, when you're seal coating only and there's no rubber, but still there's cracks there, that's kind of an extra special situation, because you're not going to put any rubber in these cracks, but you want to do a good job. So you have to take extra special care, because you know that rubber isn't going to be there to back you up as far as you know, filling in the crack. You can kind of be sloppy with rubber a little bit as long as it's in the crack, because it'll stay if it's dry and right. But when you put sealer in there, it's not like rubber. It'll crumble in that crack. It's like a cookie, kind of. The rubber is like malleable. It's got a little bit of give. It's kind of bounce, you know, it's got the bounce back and everything like rubber does. You know, rubber ball bounces, right? Well, if you take a little chunk of paint, a little thick chunk of paint you've ever peeled off of something, it's crumble. You can break it. It's not rubbery. So you got to make sure you clean these cracks out really good and deep enough to where the sealer can sit in there. And as you're sealing, you know, try not to pull every last bit of sealer extra off that driveway. Try to leave, you know, when you're sealing, you just don't push down super hard. Leave a little bit on your brush. You don't want to leave a huge mess, but if it's that bad to where they don't even want rubber, then the situation's already dire, and you might as well just leave a little extra sealer for them. So let's kind of go over the phases and why they're important. Why the first part of it is the most important, even though you don't want to hear that. Everybody wants to talk about the sealing because it's fun, it looks cool, you get to brush a big, huge brush, and it's really cool and awesome. But there's something that's got to be done first, and it's the most important part, and that's the prep, the cleaning. So that's phase one, the cleaning phase. Why is it so important? Well, I don't know if you've ever tried to paint anything or put something down that had to have a clean surface and it wasn't clean and it wasn't ready. Then it's like, for instance, if you're a roofer, you don't clean all the nails off the roof and you go to felt it. Now you're like, dude, what the hell? You're pulling nails out from behind the felt because it wasn't cleaned right. It wasn't prepped right. It wasn't pre-prepped. It's basically a pre-prep. It's the cleaning phase where you clean everything. Like a roofer, you're tearing the roof off and you're cleaning all the nails, all the loose shingle. You're cleaning the gutters out. You got guys in the bottom doing the cleaning on doing the groundwork. It's the most important part because without doing that right, then when you go to apply the product, it's not going to be right. It's not going to be done to specifications, and it's going to make you a hack. All right, you're a hack if you don't clean right. If you just kind of blow through stuff and then slam your product down, you're a hack. Showing how much you care about the cleaning process and the prep process really shows how professional you are. That's where the professionalism really lies and where it first shows itself. Now, after you do the prep, it all depends on the job you got. If it's an average job, then you're going to have to do rubber. Rubber can be done in a couple different ways. We have a bander, we have pour pot and V-squeegee, we also have a cam 10, and we have the wand. So I guess there's roughly about 4 different application processes we use for rubber. When on residentials, we do either a bander or we use a pour pot and V-squeegee. Now the rubber it's the most important visual part of the job, really, because you can slob it up and it'll look like crap, and the customer wants you to come back and make it look right. You can miss big cracks, and they'll want you to come back and hit a couple more cracks. That's usually what your callbacks are for. Is if it's not a washout from rain, it's usually because they weren't happy with the rubber job. Now, when you're all done with the rubber, then you're cutting in and seal coating.
Finally.
Don't forget, at the end, if you're cutting in and seal coating, you got to tape the driveway off so nobody drives on it. And just in case you hadn't figured it out yet or you hadn't noticed, we have all water-based sealers, so that's why we're even able to do it when it's wet at all. So that covers most of everything there for the getting a job done type stuff. What you'll need, the processes, the phases, what I believe is the most important, which is the cleaning and the prep. And I'm working on a video right now that's going to cover the difference between spraying a job and brushing a job as far as material usage, everything. How many guys you'll need, total time as far as prepping it, spraying it, as opposed to brushing it, the difference in machinery that you'll need, we'll cover all that in the next one. So again, I just want to say thanks for watching. We appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next one.